Welcome, everyone. This is our third Lunchable Results session, and today we're lucky to have with us Elissa Benson to talk us through factor analysis, which is a tool that a lot of us here at the county have been testing and trying out and finding useful. So just as a little context, the Lunchable Results sessions are chances for us to collaborate and share experiences, hopefully to accelerate results in our own work. So that's the goal of these. We're trying to come together, give you all 15 minutes of context and content, put you all into breakout groups so that you can talk about what you heard and how it might apply to your own work, and then come back and do a little synthesis and hopefully set you on your way to practicing the tool and seeing how you might apply it in your day-to-day lives here. So I'm going to launch an intro poll, and as we're doing that, if you all want to put into the chat, just by way of introduction, your name, your role, and your agency that you work for, that would be awesome, just so that we can see who all we have on the call. And then we have a poll question that we'd like you to answer as a way of a check-in. So the question is, when trying to fix a problem, do you primarily focus on quick solutions, look for patterns, dig deeper, or consider different perspectives?
Hey, Sven.
Hey,
I'm curious, is anyone else having a hard time finding where chat is in this?
I can't find it either.
It's not available.
Okay, gotcha. Well, then don't put it in the chat. New directions. Um, Sorry about that. I'll have to look at our Zoom.
We may
and
just
see
have to
if
figure out how to turn it on for this
Yeah,
particular.
that's right.
But
Okay, but it looks like we have most of the responses here. No one is admitting to looking for quick solutions, so that's interesting. And we have about 60% of us who are folks digging deeper. And so we have a lot of folks that are curious, want to get down to root causes, and that's great. This is factor analysis is a tool that at its heart is designed to get underneath what the surface issues are and try to learn more about the problems that we are trying to fix here. And so with that, I'm happy to turn this session over to Elissa Benson, who is our Assistant County Executive Officer and has been both here and in her previous role in Seattle, where she worked in King County, has been trying to think about different ways to move work at an organizational level. And so we're super lucky to have her here and to hear about how she's applying this tool to her work here at the county. So Lisa, take it away.
well, thanks so much, Sven. Happy noon hour, everyone. Thank you for choosing to spend your lunchtime with us. Was really excited to be able to come and talk about this particular tool. And it was funny in the lead up to this meeting, I didn't quite track that we were having the invitation go so far and wide. And I'm so glad to have folks from so many different corners of the county doing work come together to talk about this. And it's funny because then people in sort of random places asked me, oh, hey, I saw your thing on factor analysis. And, you know, I'm really looking forward to coming into it. So it was kind of a fun run up to the session today. And in some of those conversations and in this is not mathematics, right? Factor analysis, some people might go, yeah, there's a whole branch of mathematics that's factor analysis. This is, and actually I want to make sure, Sven, if you can, I sent you a slightly different slide deck in the time you were introducing the poll, because I realized I had a slide out of order. So if you can bring
No
that up, that
problem.
would be great. I want to say a little bit, and this may have been covered in if you've been at some of the other lunch and learns that we're doing. A lot of this work really has come out of our partnership with Annie Casey Foundation on results count and a whole rich, deep, broad set of framework to improving results for community. And I was really fortunate to be part of one of the first cohorts here in the county to go through the training. And this particular tool that they shared was so elegant and so straightforward to me that I just thought it was, it's something I think we all do in the roles we have, but it gave language and structure to take it to the next level. So with that, I'm going to ask Sven to share the screen. And I will say so in that cohort, we're really asked to practice the work and do work along the way. And I will mention a little bit about what my assignment was and how I used this tool in that as an example for it. But really, this opening slide is really about factors. What do we mean? I mean, factors, it's a really simple word. Determinants, you know, what determines results? And so that's what we're using there. There are variables in, you know, in all of these systems that help or hinder affecting the results we're trying to affect. And by really trying to understand, identify what those things are, that can help us better understand what are the levers, the buttons, the things we want to exercise change with to improve those outcomes. So it's really this idea of a, for lack of a better word, an environmental scan about what are all the things that affect that result, and whether you have control over those factors, those determinants or not. What are those things? Be really open and thoughtful about how you think those results are moderated by different activities, different structures, and taking that inventory. And then, and this is one of the values of Annie E. Casey's approach, and then check your own bias, right? That we all come to these conversations with our viewpoints, our experiences, so we see things a little bit differently or a lot differently. And so if you just do it from your own vantage point, you're probably not getting the whole story. So this is this idea of you have to bring more voices to really try and understand and assess what are the factors that are in play here. So that I just wanted, like, these are sort of some of the key aspects of this tool. So now let's go to the next slide. And hopefully it's the right one. Yes, it is. So pretty straightforward. This is like I said, I think it's a quite elegant and simple framework. First, you know, first, and this isn't even on here, what is the thing you're trying to change? Having clarity, what is that result that you're trying to move? And you need to do that first. And as I talk about this, I'm going to share a little bit of the example of what I was doing in my initial exposure to the results count framework. As part of my role, I have sort of general oversight and leadership responsibilities around how the county chooses to spend dollars in capital facilities, in buildings, in parks. You know, it's that investment in the built environment. And my goal in looking at that was, and I'll just read a little bit of the statement, was to develop what we called an equity forward capital improvement program that prioritizes county investments to improve access to and the quality of facilities that advance safety, wellness, and equitable opportunities for low-income and BIPOC residents and businesses. So I wanted to improve our investment in facilities that support our underserved communities. That's where we should be putting our dollars. So that was I wanted to get that number to go up. So you have to do that, and then so this idea is, what does he have? Well, so what's happening right now? What's happening right now? And you have to have a way to track that. How are you going to measure that? And for me, and I'll show you the pictures. For me, that was the number of projects and the dollar amount of projects that met this criteria. And then the next step is really, okay, well, what are the things that are helping that number go up? What are the things that are making it harder to do that? And so that's sort of that first order of factor analysis. Like, okay, you need more money, you know. You need to have staff who know how to determine that this investment in this building will actually benefit the people that you say you want to benefit. So you're identifying those first order contributing things that are going to change that result. And then this third section is where we sort of move from basic to probably where we pause frequently, because it's moving beyond that sort of what's the quick solution, what's the quick answer. It's trying to understand that there may be factors, variables at play that are much less visible. And this is where we get to this concept, and you'll see the parentheticals here, the iceberg analysis. And I'm going to actually ask Sven to go to the next slide. The iceberg analysis. This is this concept of what we see at the top of the water. The events that we see are a function of so much underneath the water. And that we have to understand this larger picture to really have a grasp on why we are getting the results we are getting, right? And so we're going to talk a little bit about this this chart. There's this concept of the patterns of behavior. We do things in a certain way by design, by default, and that is going to inform, just the fact that we have those habits is going to inform the results that we have. The structure of the system, the fact that, and in my case, you know, we do this type of decision making around capital investment only one time a year. That in itself is going to introduce certain outcomes, certain limitations into the system. So like thinking about what we believe are the boundaries of our systems, and that in itself may be impacting that ultimate result we're trying to change. And then there's even that deeper level of mental models that we may explicitly acknowledge, but may also not be aware of around just it's more around values and beliefs about how things work, which may in fact, well, typically are going to reflect bias. And being able to start paying attention to those things because those are the things that are sometimes outside of an individual grasp, but really might be driving how that logic model, that chain of events plays out to get to the result you're trying to get to or not get to. So we put this stuff gets a little bit deeper, and sometimes I think as we go into practicing some of this, we'll see it takes more mental energy to start going deeper into the water, under the water, to actually identify some of these contributing factors. But we want to highlight them for everyone because they are there, whether we acknowledge them or not. And ideally, y'all will leave this quick exposure to this tool and think about the fact that we do have these layers that inform how things happen, and think more deeply about how things happen. And are there places we can challenge these structures to get better results? So this is a sort of, as I mentioned, sort of the more advanced push in factor analysis, but we wanted to share it because this in itself is an interesting way to engage in discussion across the community about what are we trying to do and why, and where do we want to focus our energies. All right, next slide. So here's the tool. It's pretty simple. We have a little bit of an XY, a figure here, and you have this concept of, you know, that gray line there is here's how it's going now, whatever that is. Here's how much investment we are putting into equity-oriented facilities today. How do I change that? How do I get that number to go up? And as you see, we have sort of this concept of the current state and the future state. And then it's pretty straightforward from here. There's things that push that curve down that are going to work against the result you're trying to seek. And there's some things that are going to push those lines up and increase the results you're trying to address. And the concept in factor analysis is now we try and populate what's above the line and what's below the line, with a really open mind about it, and actually saying the obvious sometimes, because I think one of the things many of us who do this work, we do have our immediate go-tos, and almost always we will say it's going to be about the money. There's not enough, right? So that's almost, so I mean, but the idea of this is to go beyond that. What are the other things that are not just that we don't have enough of X that also contribute to that? So with the next slide, I'm going to share an example. And this is also, I chose this really specifically. It doesn't have to be on a computer. I mean, it's a piece of paper, right? For my project, for me, the way I like to work, sometimes I need to sort of engage and draw and write to get my head around it. So this was my first attempt at a factor analysis around increasing equity forward, facility investments for the county. I want the number to go up. And what I started to identify is, here's the things you're going to see, then you would expect this, right? Lack of funding, just straight up, there's not enough money. That there is a backlog of other things, other county things that are not necessarily equity focused, that are demanding funds. That, as I mentioned, maybe we don't have staff, we don't even have a system within the county capital budget process to highlight and how to even identify what an equity forward project is. Like there's a knowledge gap. That we don't have staff that are really thinking about capital programming strategically, that everyone approaches it differently across the county, that departments have inequitable access to funds for this kind of work. Of course, there's the big one. The operating budget gets most of the focus. So these were all of those hindering factors and more that we started to identify. At least this was my view from my point of my vision, my vantage point, and clearly it reflects my vantage point. And there's going to be other perspectives. And then we talked about, you know, I started to go, well, what's going to help? Well, we knew we had some recent infusions. We had Project Home Key dollars coming in. We had the Pajaro Valley Levy, which is like supporting the Pajaro River Levy project. So these were like very county specific. That countywide grant writing capacity, if we had more of that, that would get more money towards investing in this. That our own internal processes, CPRC is that, Capital Project Review Committee, was starting to focus on this and shine a light on this in a way that the county has not done this before. So this was the idea of like, there are things that are happening that can push to make this result change. And this is again, just an example, just you're trying to take that time to focus on what are the things that will impact your result, large and small. So that's the example that I wanted to share. So the next slide, please, Sven. So then we come to this question of validating that. That was me working on my homework, drawing a picture. What did it look like from where I sit? And that is a very limited view. It's a biased view. So how do you then validate those factors? You have to invite other folks to the table to talk about, well, how do they see it? What do they, and that gives you a much more comprehensive view of the complex environment this is all happening in. So you want to get different voices at the table and different perspectives at the table to look at Elissa's factor analysis and say, wait a minute, you know, you're not saying anything about like, you know, who says what's going to help the community? Like who determines that? And you want to sort of get other people to challenge and engage with the information and the data. Then this question of, you know, how are you counting? Are you miscounting? And then there's like that question of root causes. Can you take it to the next set of whys? You know, well, why is it that we don't have staff trained in this? And so you're going to, and that's going to actually help you uncover the next, maybe the missing factors, those systems, those mental models underneath the water that also contribute to the result, either as a helping factor or a hindering factor. And then the next step with that is, so now you have this list of all these variables that affect your outcome. And then the next question is, well, what do you pick to sort of focus on as a strategy? What factor do you pick on to move forward to improve your result? And once you have that more validated ground truth set of factors, that's the next step where you start talking about, well, what is going to have the biggest impact? You know, and it's, of course, you can do it individually, but also doing that as a team. What of these things, what is going to change it the most? What do you have control over, right? Feasibility. Like there's certain things like, well, that's a federal thing and we're never going to be able to, you know, affect that. So there's also that question of control and what is your scope of authority? And then there's this thing that I think one of the more interesting parts of the framework in that looking at factors is did you find something that surprised you? That maybe if you pushed on that small thing, it would have a disproportionately large impact on it. And I'll give an example uh, in terms of how we use this in my initial work. That was small, but really started shifting how people were thinking about this. So going through that step of first validating factors and getting more views of what's most important, really, I mean, it's going to improve the quality of your process and your decision. And then taking that step of how are you going to pick one thing to try first, and then do that, and then you can go to another factor. And the idea here is, I mean, everyone said they don't jump to immediate solutions. I sometimes do. That makes you slow down and say, wow, why did I think it was this? When maybe there's something else that is sort of hiding under the water that I'm not paying attention to that might have a greater impact. So that's one of the real benefits of using this model. So next slide. So no one can read this, but this is then a second version of that factor analysis where we basically, and I'm not sure there's a lot of people here, but a few people who may have been part of this, where we took that question of, okay, how do we increase the number of equity forward projects to a larger group of people, and got their perspectives on what the factors were. So, and then we did it on a whiteboard, remote Teams meeting. And so it was a way to get more ideas and more concepts around what are the things that are going to affect this. Next slide. So in terms of that analysis, where we landed, in terms of where were we going to move forward after the factor analysis was, and this is sort of an amalgamation of the sort of feasibility effect question, was this question of staff capacity straight up, like that if we actually helped people who are developing capital programs understand that this was something we were looking for and prioritizing and measuring, they would do it. But it wasn't something that they were doing. We recognized that there was a gap in terms of having internal assumptions about what is the highest and best use of a capital dollar to serve underserved community, that we were really coming to that from an insider county perspective, and we needed to test that with community to say, we're making assumptions about this. Some of them reflect county constraints, but we need to test that. There's always this resource issue, right? That this is one of many, many, many priorities, and is there a way in the long run to get a dedicated funding, and then that competition for resources. And then there's some factors that we couldn't really affect, like the universe of storms that we've been living in the past 5 years, that things happen in the world, and that then we can't control it, but we're acknowledging it, that then resources get diverted. And then just like this simple one, that it became a priority, that it had not been something that was focused on before as something we should be focusing on. So this helped us then basically focus on, what we could do in real time was focus on the decision processes that we had within the county, like just that even sharpen that focus, that this was a value and would be valued in when we were prioritizing spending. That doesn't mean that all those other factors that we didn't lean into aren't relevant or important. They are. And some of them have much longer work timelines associated with them. But it was a wonderful way to sort of assess the environment quickly. This doesn't have to be, it can go very, very quickly, and ground your work in a broader view of how systems perform. All right, next slide. I think it's almost the last one, and then I don't even want to spend too much time on this. This was just basically, what did we then do? And this was how we said, okay, well, we really need to integrate this into our process within the county. We have to teach people about it. We need to help them understand how to collect data on their projects, and then see how things move in the next round.